Is there a secret history of the United States intentionally hidden by the mainstream media? Could there be a secret society of fat-moneyed businessmen whose agenda has been the cause of every major war and economic depression? Is there a shadowy elite gently pulling the strings of our world to bring about their own self-serving political program? The answers may surprise you.
Nearly 200 years ago, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of their currency, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property, until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers occupied."
Throughout the history of the United States, there's been this running battle over who controls how much money is in the system. Will it be some privately owned central bank, or will it be the people, the Congress, for the benefit of everybody in the country?
Everything evolves around the Federal Reserve, a private bank that was given a monopoly on the creation of paper money.
Every $100 bill which the Federal Reserve System prints and is sold to the United States at full face value represents a $100 loan. Even though the government pays for it, they still pay interest.
100 years after Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln pondered these same issues. The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency, he said. Creating and issuing money is the supreme prerogative of government. Adopting these principles will save the taxpayers immense sums of interest, and money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity. What do the fears expressed by Jefferson and Lincoln and modern-day economists have to do with what President George Bush called the New World Order?
It's a conspiracy. What else can you call it? It's a conspiracy against the people of the United States and of the Western world.
Just when you think you're ahead of the game, someone changes the rules.
This week, we'll visit the scene of a crime so huge that most of you will not believe it to be real, and so perfect that even today, 86 years after the fact, few realize that the crime even took place. The creation of the Federal Reserve System was about more than just money. Some refer to it as the secret birth of a criminal conspiracy to rob the American middle class of its hard-earned wealth. Others believe it to be part of an attempt to bring the world under the control of a shadowy international elite that calls itself the New World Order. And through it all, we have wars, assassinations, and Martians. In fact, if it weren't for the Martians, you might have heard about this mother of all conspiracies a long time ago.
We know now, within the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
On October 30th, 1938, the Mercury Radio Network interrupts the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra from the Park Plaza Hotel of New York City for a special news bulletin. The infamous War of the Worlds broadcast begins with its terrifyingly real description of an invasion from Mars. And before the night is out, 1 million people will run panicked into the streets.
I'm extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips.
After what has been a closely guarded secret for nearly 50 years, Orson Welles' original broadcast turns out to be no mere show business stunt.
Should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
But instead was a complex psychological warfare test conducted by C.D. Jackson for the Rockefeller Foundation. When the results are compiled nearly 2 years later, they are released to an elite whose names most men will not speak of over a whisper. Among them groups like the Bilderbergers, Trilateral Commission, CFR, and the Federal Reserve.
C.D. Jackson was the equivalent of being the head of the National Security Council in the White House under Eisenhower. He was the chief of psychological warfare.
The breakthrough discovery that the War of the Worlds broadcast was actually a psychological warfare test is key to understanding why experts believe that the Federal Reserve, the Bilderbergers, and other closed exclusive elite groups are pulling the strings that control our societies.
Well, it's a fraternity. They have a common objective, and this common objective is to maintain control.
America grew so rapidly and became wealthy so quickly that really we've always been the thorn in the side of this New World Order crowd. They've just never been able to get us completely under their control. So America is the target, and once they finally get us subdued, the rest of the world would fall very quickly.
Moguls like the late J.P. Morgan, a man so excessively wealthy his likeness adorns the tycoon card in the board game Monopoly, are all safely cloaked behind their own carefully constructed versions of history. But are the private agenda of these select few woven permanently into the fabric of world economy? Are we simply the unwitting pawns in a game whose rules were written amidst the clandestine corridors of private social clubs 100 years ago or more? Hundreds of miles south of the banking capital of the world, New York City, just off the coast of Georgia, Jekyll Island provided a winter retreat to the rich and famous. This tiny ocean getaway was formerly owned by the monopoly man himself, international financier J.P. Morgan. Here, in a conclave intended to remain secret forever, 6 international bankers plan what is to become America's most powerful private institution, the Federal Reserve System.
The Jekyll Island story is one of the great untold stories of the 20th century. These bankers who got together, left Hoboken in a sealed train, and the reporters were going crazy. They knew this was big. These were 5 of the biggest bankers in the world getting on this sealed train. The reporters wanted to know what the hell was going on. And they didn't know for years what had happened.
It is at the urging of the famous poet Ezra Pound that Eustace Mullins begins his own personal search for the truth about the origins of the Federal Reserve.
Ezra Pound's young artists and writers friends were killed during World War I. Ezra wanted to know why they died. Digging book by book, row by row, in the entire economics section of the Library of Congress, I found this little magazine with the Jekyll Island story in it. When I took that to Ezra Pound, he was so thrilled. It was the biggest discovery of his life.
In fact, Ezra Pound called the Jekyll Island story the biggest detective story of the 20th century. But why? Andrew Gray, grandnephew of one of the 6 men who met to plot the creation of the Federal Reserve System, scoffs at talk of secret cabals.